Because we have an international guest, an international speaker today. I'm very delightful that she could join us today. It's been a while since we actually have presentations and content from two different directions. And today it's about three, let's say, different parts of the industry around this specific topic. We have on one hand, we got a startup, so still a small tech, obviously with big ambitious, representing Orchest. So he is a co-founder of a company in Delft, a spin out of the University of Delft in the domain, obviously, on AI and data science. So he will be introducing in the first couple of minutes in the first settings or first session, a couple of minutes about his company, the background, and the problem they're trying to solve with that technology. And and then it starts running on its own. The second speaker is Peter Haan, representing a large company, so big tech, IBM, managing data and AI for this specific region. So he will be presenting, digging a bit deeper in the use cases and around the topic of how companies can apply data science. So we're trying for today's session not to take you through the details, the technical details, all the possibility. It's about applying it. So looking forward to that part of the story. Peter will be supported by Sophie, who will also be presenting. Sophie Kuijt, working in the domain of data and AI ethics within IBM. And she will be hosting a introduction towards skills and capabilities with respect to data science. And last but certainly not least is Anna Fensel, just recently joined the Wageningen University, researcher and in the domain of AI. And she will be facilitating and presenting more about kind of the ecosystem towards how you as an organization can play a role and how you can leverage capabilities of AI and managing large volumes of data in an ecosystem or a supply chain. So really glad all four of you have time and accepted our invitation to present and share your insights and experience with the audience of today. Like I said, it's possible to exchange questions to the audience, so immediately dive in. Please use the chat. Marita or myself will invite you to ask the question, or we will speak it out loud during the first part of the plenary session. So Rick, can I ask you to switch off your mute and do a short introduction, who you are, tell us a bit about Orchest, and because it's been a while since a data-driven company has been rising from the internal research Dutch University is doing. So I'm really glad you could join us. Take it away.
Absolutely. I will try to share my screen. So I will stop your screen share in the process, I believe. I'm going to switch over and let me know if things are coming through. Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Awesome. So glad to be here. I really like the topics. In fact, as a startup, we're dealing with mainly AI and data science, but quantum computing is close to my heart. And I'll end my introduction by saying a little bit about the Delft-inspired ecosystem that's forming around quantum computing and what I see of that as a founder from the Delft ecosystem. I originally studied business, so I'm currently 27 years of age, but I started out at Erasmus University studying business administration. I graduated with a master's degree and somehow found a way to talk myself into TU Delft, which is actually a fairly non-trivial thing to do if you study business, because in Delft they don't have a very hoge pet op van bedrijfskunde, so to say. So eventually I was able to do that study in computer science, informatica in Delft, and I really enjoyed my time there. And it's because I witnessed something that you could describe as the Cambrian explosion in data science and machine learning models. It was around this time that the pioneers in the field, Geoffrey Hinton and Jan LeCun, got the Turing Award, which is the Nobel Prize in computer science, for their work on deep learning models that are highly parameterized, which basically is everything that everyone is talking about when they talk about machine learning and AI. What I also realized is that I wanted to start my own company. And I was fortunate enough to get access to the network of investors in the San Francisco Bay Area to start this company, because they are, I would argue, very forward-looking investors that have deep expertise in the field that we wanted to start a company in. So in 2020, in January, my co-founder and I, he's also from Technical University of Delft, he studied mathematics. We flew out to the San Francisco Bay Area and we just started talking to people. That's where the story of Orchest begins. That's where we raised our first small round of financing. And as of July this year, in 2021, about 18 months after the original raise, we got additional investment from large names such as Google with their Gradient Venture Fund. We're extremely happy to be able to work in this field. And I would just like to quickly introduce you, what is Orchest actually doing? What are we developing? So Orchest is a tool.
Rick, Jeroen, can I ask one question on the fact that Google, specifically Google Ventures, Gradient Venture, invested in your company? Do they own a specific portfolio towards data analytics, or is it more a generic investment fund?
So in particular, great question. In particular, Gradient Ventures invest in ML and AI related companies. So it's a topical investment fund. It's a non-strategic fund. So it's a financially oriented goal with which the fund was created. And we see all kinds of AI and ML related companies. Most of them have to do with the application of ML technologies to a specific business problem.
Nice. Okay, thank you.
So I was going to introduce what we're actually building, and this is what the product looks like, but what does it actually do? And the main goal is to simplify the creation and deployment of data pipelines for data science teams. And if you're a big company, you probably have some people who we would qualify data scientists working in your organization. And what they get out of Orchest is three advantages. The first thing is that they don't have to build their own data platform and spend valuable resources of highly sought after software engineers and DevOps specialists that need to maintain this platform in order for data scientists to do their work. So basically, Orchest frees up organizational resources in that precious engineering organization. And most companies think of, like, for example, ING Bank, like they have huge amounts of engineers working on their critical products and infrastructure. You don't also want to burden them with building the platform on which data scientists can work to do their analytical work. So that's the first reason. The second reason is often these build adventures where they build their own data platform end up increasing the timeline with which the timeline that you need to be able to deploy predictive models to production. And I think one of the biggest issues, and probably we're going to talk about this at length during the upcoming discussions and breakout, is the biggest issue with data science initiatives is that you can't get them over the line in production. And if they're not in production, they're not giving you value. So they're not returning on your investment in your data science team, in your technologies, in your data acquisition. In order for data initiatives to return value, they need to be running in production. You need to be learning. And the goal of Orchest is to get to that point much more quickly by standardizing on many of the parts involved in building out these data processing pipelines. And finally, cloud providers often offer solutions that have the same types of promises, but eventually you'll be locked into that cloud provider environment. And in software engineering, this has been identified, and the solution became Kubernetes. It's a unified deployment plane where you can have your software engineers deploy against a common substrate, which is called Kubernetes. And you can take what you've built and treat it as an asset that you can move to any environment because you're not tied with that asset to a particular cloud environment. We're doing the same things for data processing pipelines. We let you define these data pipelines. They're valuable resources to the company. They cost a lot of money to to construct, and we make sure that you can take them wherever you need to strategically be, whether that's on-premise, in a virtual private cloud, on AWS, GCP, or Azure. It's a portable solution that your data scientists end up implementing. So that's, in a nutshell, what Orchest does. And we're working with companies like Accenture that are evaluating how to use Orchest for purposes like cash flow prediction. They want to, for example, optimize the account receivables for large Fortune 500 customers of theirs. And they're basically turning regular data analysts that know a little bit of Python into full-blown data analysts that are building these data pipelines that solve use cases such as optimizing the cash flow of the business that they're serving. In addition, we're working with companies like or universities like Georgetown University. They're working in particular on personalized medicine, where they use DNA biomarkers to identify which treatments work better on what specific DNA profile. And it's fun for us to work with both types of customers, because Accenture will eventually make our company profitable, and the Georgetown Universities of the world are going to make a big difference in the future, and we get to contribute to them through our open source project. So that's the very short summary version of who I am and what Orchest is doing for the first 20 months of existence.
Thank you, Rick, and pretty awesome story so far. So a few questions on the because I like the examples you give on use cases. But the reason for developing this technology, is that now scale and speed? Is this a specific? And Herman is asking a similar type of question, I think, about maturity of the customer, but also scale of the customer. So when should clients consider having a chat with you?
That's a great question, because there's definitely a concept of readiness in the industry. Where are you in your data journey to become ready to do the analytical work, the prediction model development that comes to play when you're using Orchest? I would say, generally speaking, you first need to have a mature data warehouse that is being fed with information from business processes. So that needs to be order information, company process information, and you need to already have that existing infrastructure. Companies like Snowflake, Google BigQuery, but even sometimes Oracle provide wonderful data warehouses on which your data scientist can build a view, and they can actually start using that collected information to feed the decisions of internal divisions. So let's take an example of a supply chain department. They need to have all that supply chain information, maybe from suppliers, maybe from the primary processes, collected in a data warehouse. And then you can get a data scientist to start asking the questions that the manager of the supply chain has about reliability, risk zones, opportunities for optimization. And that's where Orchest comes in.
And to what extent are, because these are kind of big names you mentioned, so you're part of that specific infrastructure, or do you run into head-to-head competition with the likes, for instance, of IBM or SAS or any of those bigger organizations in this domain for data warehousing?
I think the interesting observation about the data ecosystem is that it has a long history. Companies like IBM's SPSS product, but also products like RapidMiner, or even more traditional SQL-based products like Power BI from Microsoft, they are existing solutions that sometimes work sufficiently for the use cases. The trend that we've seen pick up over the last 5 years that we're fully tapped into is about using open source frameworks and libraries to do your data analytics. And Orchest is fully like TensorFlow, PyTorch, Pandas, Streamlit, maybe something like scikit-learn, or something like NumPy, Matplotlib. So I could name a host of open source libraries. There are actually hundreds of open source libraries that people end up using. And the big advantage here is that companies can treat those open source frameworks as shared R&D. because the open source projects are being developed by a quant hedge fund called 2 Sigma, and they're developed by Google internally or Facebook internally with PyTorch. And so these frameworks boost the productivity of data scientists, but to be able to organizationally wield these open source projects, you need tooling that has first-class support for it. And that's what we focused on with Orchest.
Cool, cool. There's a question from Erwin at Kadaster about Airflow. To what extent is that? Are you familiar with that? Is it?
I'm very familiar. I know Max, the guy who created it. I met him in San Francisco in 2019. Airflow is a great solution for data engineering. So I would say if you want to build reliable systems that continuously update your data warehouse with recent information from primary processes or sometimes even sales CRM sources, that's where I would use Airflow. If you have a data scientist who have an exploratory question or a predictive modeling question, that typically doesn't fit very well with the Airflow workflow. So I would say data engineers go with Airflow, data scientists go with Orchest.
Okay, like the explanation. And what is a specific industry because you're a small company, pick your first clients as well. What is the, let's say, the most interesting industry where you gain the quickest return on working with your technology?
The answer here is
industry use case.
Yeah, the answer is basically who has the highest value data available. Because at the end of the day, it's an economic decision-making process. How much do I pay for data scientists? What kind of impact can they make? So what we typically find is that companies need to be relatively mature, so large revenue streams, and they need to have data that is highly exploitable to optimization. So for example, we get companies in the financial sector, insurance companies, we get companies in the B2B SaaS space. So that's like pretty forward-looking companies. They're pretty modern typically, but they're serving B2B customers, and they have typically high-value customers that they want to better serve. So they're trying to understand better the behavior of these customers and try to predict what customers could be upsold to, for example. So as long as there's high-value data and large amounts of revenue, then typically the data science investment makes sense.
Cool. Thank you, Rick. I think we should pause here for a moment. What I would welcome you to do, this is not rehearsed, is to include your email address in the chat, because I think it's really cool that we have such an advanced startup from this country. So that should meet. Well, would be great to be leading there with use cases as well for the audience to want to get in contact with you. So this is cool. This is great. This is about technology and about the fact that the data science, leveraging the technology and setting up those analytical pipelines. I think that's a good, step up towards our next speaker, and that is Peter of IBM. So let me dig up. Evernote crashing on me. So Peter, welcome. And interesting, we just had a technology tooling kind of introduction. It's kind of, we can spend the whole afternoon until tomorrow about IBM and tooling. But you've chosen as a kind of the new, also positioning the new IBM to more about kind of, what is it, the application and the use of towards the organizational aspects around this topic of leveraging AI. So can I hand over to you to take us through those, including a couple of examples, I think.
Exactly. I guess, let me try to share a screen.
Works perfectly on this side.
This one. So I'm Peter den Haan, working at IBM. And before IBM, I started my career in software research and development at Philips, Eindhoven. Then spent quite a while, 20 years in US, Silicon Valley startups, UK scale-ups. And then the last 10 years have been with IBM. And IBM indeed has gone through a lot of change, and nowadays is really focusing on a variety of, let's say, new developments, of which Rick alluded to quite a few already. And what I would like to do is take a step back, look at what we see when we get in touch with companies that are starting with AI or are developing AI towards what I would call, let's say, phase 2 in rollout and deployment, beyond picking the first algorithm. So it's not just AI is nice, interesting, sexy. You expect more from it than a regular BI KPI, but you need to move that into your operation, into your business. And that's the challenge that often brings customers to talk to IBM for, let's say, advice or for technology. And it should be open technology, of course, today. If you look at the world of AI, it's really about data and AI. And as Rick already mentioned, it's not just the algorithm, it's how you use the algorithm in the context of your data, because without data, there's no AI today. Data needs to be prepared, needs to be ready to use, needs to be the right quality, needs to be the right forward-looking information. And you want to apply that. But once you have done your first proof point, what I would call your phase 1 result, you need to think ahead. You need to think into what does this algorithm do for my business? And that causes a lot of, let's call it, strength on this next activity. You need to think about deployability. How does this run for my data environment, which may be much larger than the first spreadsheets or extracts that you are running through the algorithms? Performance, scaling. It's the effect of the AI data science algorithms on your business and your end users. Suddenly, the algorithm starts to suggest things to end users, and end users should not just take their gut feeling in order to make decisions. AI doesn't stand on its own. It's application integration, it's application seeding. AI isn't done with the first algorithm. It has a life of its own. Develop DevOps, lifecycle management, quality engineering. Where should it run? Is it cloud-based? Is it locally in your data center? Should it be a mix? Should it be the same thing, running externally and internally? These are questions that need to be approached from the right way with the right technology as well. Governance questions, privacy questions on who can access what data. How should I report about the use of AI? Like in finance, heavily regulated, like government, like, let's say, current discussions in Holland, Belastingdienst, toeslagenaffaire. Why does a process decide this way or that way? Today, it's all dependent on data and suggestions made by algorithms, AI, decision support systems. And last but not least, AI doesn't stand on its own. It needs to conform to IT standards. It needs to fit within your enterprise architecture. And these are challenges that you need to face and prepare for in order to create continuity after your first AI initiatives, like Rick already mentioned. And that means that you need to move towards, let's call it, platform thinking rather than point solutioning through AI. You need to create a platform that has the flexibility, the modularity, the openness in order to make steps and move your organization, your company forward in maturity in working with AI. And this can often be a big challenge for organizations, how to adopt AI and then make that part of your business maturity and your approach in innovation. What does IBM do in that context? It suggests to look at it from, let's call it, a layered perspective, which we sometimes call an AI ladder, a journey, a development towards a good foundation for AI. It is, of course, the data integration, like what Rick said. You might want to pull everything into a data warehouse, or use virtualization and remote access in order to keep data where it is, given organizational distribution in multiple locations. Virtualization is then an essential technique. The data that you bring together, it needs to be understood, interpreted, defined. It needs to be protected. Access control, GDPR, AVG. Who can access what and when? That is becoming more and more critical. You need to have rules, systems, layers in place to have your data anonymized for those that cannot see the original data. Once you have arranged your data, you can start creating insights. You can then start applying and creating models, be it artificial intelligence models, or be it just statistical approaches, or be it just BI dashboards and KPIs. But once you've reached that stage, it's not about a screen, a nice visualization. It needs to become part of your business process, and that is integration with applications. It has an effect on your organization and your end users, and that's quite a development. If you look at that carefully, you need to make quite a few steps. You need to make your organization ready in order to have the right adoption of the capabilities of AI. Of course, this is infrastructure, this is software integration, this is packages, from the basic AI packages, indeed, like TensorFlow and Python, towards databases, warehouses, control, anonymization, and risk reporting to the regulator that may have a say in this as well. Therefore, automation, integration, open source embedding, like Rick says, there's a lot of open source development nowadays. It is no longer just SAS and SPSS who rule the world in terms of statistics and data mining. It's a much more diverse environment nowadays. So software environments need to be open, should be able to be based on open source, indeed, like Kubernetes, container technology for transparency and hybrid cloud deployment. And it needs to be manageable given all these developments around it. But most of all, this requires, let's say, a broad approach. So companies should not just look at AI to solve or optimize one specific problem about one specific product or service. No, when a company truly looks at the options that AI offers, you see companies transform themselves rather than having a product-oriented, service-oriented operation where you want to apply AI to optimize supply chain or optimize your sales and marketing outcomes. Now you start to generate information that span your complete product portfolio and therefore allow you to create new services and turn it upside down. Rather than having silo-based product business units, you have interconnected product information platforms that allow companies to become information-driven rather than just product optimization activities. But where do we see that? It's happening in the finance and insurance industry, where, say, a company like ING, a bank, sometimes describe themselves, we are no longer a bank, we are an IT company with a banking license. We see it in the waterschappen, Waternet. They, of course, want to use intelligent assets for maintenance optimization, but they say it's not about one pump here and a polder there. It's about an information insight, information-driven process in order to keep the polders dry. Hoe houden wij droge voeten in onze polders? Dat is een proces en een information view rather than managing 10 pumps. It is in supply chain forecasting from source to customer, where you need to have an information game in order to define which products fit which market when. And certainly in Corona times, standard sales expectations, standard supply chain cost models have changed rapidly. Cost of shipping from Asia to Europe has tripled at least. That has a huge impact on profitability for products. And if you then raise prices, how do you then predict what's happening with your sales outlet? So there's a lot of change there. We see it as well in fraud and risk. Financial companies have lots of control. There's increased interest in fraud, fines. The auditing practice like KPMG, Ernst & Young use a much more integrated approach in order to judge the validity of acquisitions, to judge the status of companies. It's no longer a spreadsheet and a bit of paper. You need to digest and analyze the information that is brought to an auditor like KPMG. So just in a nutshell, I think we've gone past this phase 1 deployment and try out of AI and data science. It's much more towards how do I best integrate AI into all of my business unit activity in order to come to ROI rather than first quick results. And that's a challenge that many companies have today.
Peter, thank you for that, I think, concise and also very good explanation on that. And I like that ladder approach as well, and including some examples. A question, I think you mentioned also about data-driven business models. It's one of those key things you see companies trying to pursue in achieving. Not sure if you use ING as an example for that, because you mentioned ING is not a bank but an IT company with a license. Would you consider ING also to be a data-driven company with a bank license?
Definitely. What we see in our indeed close cooperation with that large bank is that it has a worldwide operation with products that are created in multiple countries, which might differ between countries. And just like in, let's call it conventional marketing perspective, you have A/B testing, which product or which approach works best. Is it product A or approach A or product B or approach B? ING compares that as well between countries. How should we develop our infrastructure? Should this be country-based? Should it be worldwide? Should we decentralize depending on how countries and consumer markets behave? You want to know more about your customer, know your customer or know your citizens in order to best determine what your approach to that customer base should be. Knowing about your end customers allows you to let your product design evolve. It's not just that you, let's say, remember and store everything you know about creating and selling products. No, it's about the response of the market that depends your opportunities for tomorrow. So it's in between your outlets and your inlets, your outlet to customers and your inlet from suppliers, that you have to create your existence as a company. Now that gets fluffy, of course, but that's stretching borderlines. It's stretching borderlines. Not do the same things today as you did yesterday. You have to think about tomorrow and decide today. And that's where data can help and insight can help if you have the right connectivity and use options of your information.
I think your colleague Sophie will also talk a bit more about the change, because I think it's a change process that in the end is about leveraging most of technology. Sorry, that was too fast. Before I hand over to her, there's now this debate going on about getting grip of, and you gave the example of the Belastingdienst. So it's everyone saying, the computer says no, but actually no one can explain why. So getting grip of algorithms. What is your personal and or IBM's perspective on this?
It's a good thing, and I didn't mention it here. Indeed, the old saying is the computer says no. Today it is the data says no. And what is the data? What does this data say? Where did it come from? Is it valid? And are we interpreting the data the right way? That's the key question. The computer does only stupid things, but it's the data that determines what can be done.
And do you have any idea on how the near future will look like towards, because a lot of companies are hiding behind the black box of the algorithms. Do you think that will...
Sophie will definitely go into those details. But if you look at the screen, you have these, let's call it those 4 layers. People work at the top level, but they need to know where the data comes from, which is the bottom layer. So the interpretation and definition of the data is critical. In technical terms, it's called lineage, for example, and validity of data. That is what needs to be available in order to understand what's popping up in your dashboard, what's popping up in your decision algorithm. And black box isn't the right thing anymore. If you look around today on the internet, there are lots of articles that say, if you have a choice between a black box smart algorithm, like the big neural networks, or you could go for an explainable, almost equivalent other algorithm, take the latter one. Because you can understand an explainable algorithm, whereas a black box gives you just an answer. And as humans and as organizations, we need to explain things to our customers and those that are affected by the algorithms. So we have, as a world, we have explored a lot of capabilities in neural networks, in lots of other deep learning mechanisms. These are interesting for example, advanced techniques like image recognition, video processing, etc. But it needs to become explained. And that's key in order to have an algorithm be accepted by the organization and by the end users. And that's something in the context of belastingdienst that probably has been lost in operation.
Yeah. Thank you, Peter. And I think this is a good moment also then to introduce and hand over to Sophie, your colleague, Sophie Kuijt.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Yes. Hello,
nice
thank
meeting
you. Yes,
technology is there, but it's all about the change, I think. That's
and I think both Peter and Rick explained a lot indeed about the technology, and that's a very nice bridge to a part on top of that, indeed, about how the change is happening in the organizations, and in the end, what is the impact on the end users. And now, Peter already introduced IBM as a company. We're definitely a company developing the technology ourselves, but we're also end-to-end helping organizations to implement and monitor the applications that we build with this technology. And on top of that, and that is ongoing, we have an extensive research across the globe where we invest in 6 billion a year. So that is constantly driving new developments in these technologies, and they stand not alone. They are integrated. Peter touched upon that as well, and I think that comes also with a responsibility for a company such as IBM. Now, I work for IBM. I'm the CTO for Benelux for our consulting practice. So I drive the technical strategy there with my team. And on a daily basis, we help to make the translation of this new technology to a real application in the organizations where we work with. We are a B2B organization, so we work all the time with organizations who create applications for their own employees or for their own customers. And like I said, it comes with a responsibility when you create such technology, and also when you help companies to implement applications. Then it's very key that you have always the end user in mind, that you realize what is the impact of the application which you are building, and what you put in terms of data, AI, or whatever technology. And that is also what we fully realized as a company. We are there to create solutions that can be there for a long time. And with these kind of new applications, they have a large impact. They have a large scale. They go at a large speed. And that brings also the responsibility that you constantly need to monitor, and not only pay attention to how you build things during design, but definitely also after it goes into production. You made a certain application with a certain intent, especially in the field of data science. Once you have an application, you can see endless other possibilities of what to do next. But it has an impact, and maybe a different impact. So it's key that we help organizations, and also ourselves. We're one of those organizations using the technology ourselves, where you help that we really should make an assessment and impact of each intent that we have with the appliance. So we're creating things that we want to be adopted, that people can bond with, that people can trust, and that is indeed a change. If you're not used to work with a certain technology and with suggestions that come to you by these applications, yeah, you have to learn that, and you have to be educated also to be a responsible user of that that application. And I think that is the other way. So we as a company, and most of the time it's companies, we work in an ecosystem, not only of the technology, but also the organizations behind it. Many times there are a couple of partners, including the organization that actually put it out on the market, who together create these solutions. And that means also that together in that ecosystem, you have to align on a couple of important things. And I would like to share today 3 areas which we think is key in this change. And one of them is the pillar of culture and design. And we strongly believe that this is something that should be there from the start. So have in mind and have a process in place. In IBM, we adopted design thinking, and we created based on that also a specific framework for AI implementation. Have the difficult questions and have the realistic questions as well. What is the intent of what we want to build? Is it really something that will augment the organization, but also the people in the organization and the people who are impacted afterwards of the use of that application? That's something we need to think of right from the start in the design. And for that, we want to work in multidisciplinary and also diverse teams. For the reason of, I think Peter, you called it out as well, that we don't want any bias also in the teams, or that we at least want to minimize that impact, not only in the data, also in the teams, how they work together and how they see it. So culture and design is one, and that is something, it's much easier if you tackle that right from the start in each project, have attention for it, and in that way, yeah, make it the norm or put it at the core and not something that is seen as afterwards, okay, we also need to address this. The next pillar is, and that is, oh, I'm going too quickly. The next pillar is the use of technology that can help you in this process. Some of the things were also mentioned, have attention for what data went into the solution, to be transparent about that. And one of the things we developed also with our research department is a fact sheet that you can use during your design, where you can really document your decisions and also your sources, and that's something you can deliver with your first application or first iteration, and then improve from there. So be transparent about that, and use the tooling for that. But also we have other open source tooling developed for fairness, also for explainability, and also for robustness. And leveraging these tools will really help you to speed up, especially when the scale gets larger and larger. And afterwards, it can help you in the monitoring of the application, whether it's still doing what you intended it to do. Then the last one, that is also very important, governance. Because if you work in a team, this is a responsibility of everyone. It's not just the data scientist who should make sure that he follows this design and leverage the tooling. It's a responsibility also of the designers, of the product owners, of the ones, all the team involved. And also there, my experience, if you involve also other parties like the legal department early on, it will really help you in asking yourself the right questions early on, and that will really help you in improving a responsible way of implementing AI. Governance is also can be implemented through a board that where you can go to and really say, well, I have a difficult case, I have I have questions about it, and this board of people can help you to say yes or no, this is not what we want to do, this is not in line, for example, with the values we have as a company or with the principles we have, and that is something that we strongly believe you should have in place in an organization as well during this transformation. And finally, I think it's also important that you really allow your employees, the ones involved, to be part of this development. And you can only do that by educating also everyone about what, to a certain level, so they can also really think along and raise questions, be involved during the design as well. I think that is what I wanted to add to this for today.
I like it. Thanks. I think it gives some really good pointers. One question, Sophie, can you I think on your other noted it down. Design for fairness, I think is what you included there, and that in itself is I think it's a very good, solid kind of value to have as an organization. But isn't the problem with AI, the trick is the role of training data come at play, and is that not a big impact on the end results, on the what the AI does? To what extent can you put that take that into equation as part of that design for fairness?
Yeah, definitely. So the data is that's the starting point. But what you can do in design for fairness, or how we see it, is to also have attention and create a joint definition of what is fair. Many times when organizations start with this kind of projects, they also become aware of that they have done things a certain way, or have built up indeed a certain data set which they were not aware of, and also the question of what is fair, that is something that is part of our design for AI. And for as a next step, you can leverage the tooling to also really look at your data, and then identify bias and take measures to remove, or as much as possible. And I think also that it's not always possible to remove everything, but I think it's an obligation for everyone to at least take the effort to look at it and to become aware of what is there, and also document that, so that people, again, I think Peter mentioned that as well, that they can understand what is in there, and take that into account when you're really making the decision as an end user based on the advice from the decision support system.
Yeah. Thank you, Sophie. Also giving time, I would like to go to our last speaker before we do the breakouts, and for that we can have a more, because you're invited to be part of those breakouts as well, so get a bit of a deeper dive on this topic. Anna, it's a pleasure to have you in this today's online session. Anna Fensel, hoogleraar, Wageningen Universiteit. Anna, before I hand over to take us through your presentation, you recently joined Wageningen, but used to work in Innsbruck University. What are the difference in characteristics or scientific direction of both universities, and what made you come to the Netherlands?
Yeah, so good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for introduction, and happy to be here and get to know you. Indeed, I came from Austria, and I have been working for many years at University of Innsbruck in the field of semantic web, linked data, knowledge graphs, and most of my research was very applied and application oriented, and at some point of time, I wanted to also progress in my career, and the Netherlands in principle has very good universities, but particularly in Wageningen I joined because it's a leading university in a very important domain, which is agri-food. It's the #1 agriculture university in the world, and this is of course very, very important topic and application area, and as I am motivated by impact, which research is doing substantially, so it was a very interesting possibility for me.
Good. Nice. So yeah, and actually, when we did the introduction, you told us that you've been working on the smart city in Innsbruck, and now to smart agricultural, which is interesting. So basically, you're covering quite a bit of the land already. But yeah, take us through your presentation. We might have more time later for questions.
Mm-hmm.
Can you share the screen? Yeah.
Yes.
I think it's about to get showing.
Right. So okay. So as I have been introduced, I have started a few months ago as associate professor in artificial intelligence and data science at Wageningen University and Research. This field is new to the university because, well, traditionally Wageningen University is more like an agriculture university, but now maybe like speaker number 2, Peter from IBM, said banks become IT companies with banking license, so maybe agriculture universities also become technical universities with specialization in agriculture. At least this is my mission to what I want to see the university develop and with taking this professorship. And I will talk a little here about my research field, and this field is in particular semantic web and knowledge graphs. So I have been in this area a while, and particularly, especially AI and data science, I'm integrating also often with human and physical environments. So indeed, I have been working with smart cities a lot, and still working, and also with humans, how technology is perceived by humans, and then the core technological part is with semantic web, linked data, and also, of course, it's not impossible not to work at least a bit on machine learning and big data as well. And then it forms intelligent systems at the end, this kind of environment. Semantic web, just for those of you who maybe not knowing exactly, it's the concept appeared broadly known around 20 years ago. And this is basically a way to structure information which was sold or developed as extension of the current web, to have computers and machines to work in cooperation. So machine understandable, human understandable data representation, basically, that's it. And now, well, after 20 years, the topic was, well, it had up and downs, and of course, but now it's still very, well, it is very, very alive. We could even say maybe that semantic web replaced the normal web as we had this before semantic web. For example, knowledge graphs, which is essentially semantic web knowledge structures, for example, again now on top of hype curve of Gartner. So this technology is very demanded currently by industry, but also, of course, at other areas. There is, like at universities, also very large interest to see what actually can they do for you. What are knowledge graphs? So, for example, one of my collaboration partner from Austria, that's a picture how they explain it with their pool party product is you have, for example, knowledge structure that's country, international organization, city, and then you have can answer complex questions. For example, which city is located in the Commonwealth of Nations have a population of more than 2 million people. So it's a very complex question, and they need a data structure to answer it in a good way, because with natural language processing, it would be way too difficult. Yeah? And this is also approach what Google have taken, because they did not use semantic technology for quite a while, but at the end, they started to use it around 8 years ago. They went into knowledge graphs, and now when you ask Google, okay, give me calories of banana, you get a number, right? You don't get any more links to web pages. So this is very common now. Also, many things appeared. Also, well, if you take agri-food domain, there is also plenty of information, plenty of data. You can even find exact recipes for very specific local foods like olive oil and a lot of data on food in general. And this comes for every domain, so not only agri-food. And there is a large need to also integrate this data across applications. Again, the speakers from IBM and also previous and the first speaker was clearly that we have this demand to have interest in applications with combining data coming from different sources. And for example, in agri-food, food production and distribution, actually maybe around 26%, if you take in terms of greenhouse emissions, would be related directly to food. And and this would be composed again in many different things like packaging and distribution and how we consume food and how we produce food and distribute. So there are many aspects, and sometimes some of them depend on each other. For example, you change the packaging of food and maybe it has a positive impact on the greenhouse effect, but from the way that you need to change the storage because you change the packaging or distribution, then it has again a negative one. So it's quite complex, yeah, as you see. Knowledge graphs, so as I said, they are present everywhere, and that we have also a lot of data now around structured practically in every domain, media, health, publications, geography, environment, life sciences, so on. Another also briefly mentioned was a concept of fair data. This is also something very interesting for research, for data exchange, for research data, but not only. And it stands for findable, accessible, interoperable, reusable, and essentially also, if you think about it, it's or read the definitions, it's pure semantic technology, and this is what is used to exchange data. For example, research data that research can share, and data from experiments or observations, for example, or in agriculture, the soil quality or consumer behavior data or whatever is relevant for the domain. So this is also something what is a large application area for me currently, working at Wageningen, and there are different criteria also what you can do. For example, they define some by Research Data Alliance. There are 42 criteria what should this data be to be fair, and for many of these criteria still technical solutions are not existing. For example, in some of the projects we are addressing them. For example, we had again in Austria, in one of my past projects, we did addressing this criteria on open machine readable licenses. And we had this DALEC project where we did semantic annotations for data licenses in semantic format, and also tools to help you to choose and combine data licenses. And this was based on knowledge graphs. So again, you need to represent all this information which you want to encode in data license. And then we had tools which help you to find relevant license. And there are hundreds of them. Yeah, when you say Creative Commons or GNU or general public license and so on. Yeah, so, and this tool also allows you to create new licenses. So again, that's a prototype which can be used then in such developments. Or another top data management topic is, for example, consent. This also was mentioned, GDPR. We all know the problem, and this project, for example, I'm still doing actually still with Volkswagen, and there we do knowledge graphs to help Volkswagen to do data sharing more transparently, because they collect a lot of sensor data from cars. There are again hundreds of sensors in the car, and users have to be informed well on what they share, with whom they share, and also the sharing, for example, with insurance company. We work also with LexisNexis in one project with Volkswagen, and or with Smart City, then you need to be clear, well, with whom you share, on which conditions, what exactly you share, and there are many stakeholders, and then we need semantic technology to do this. Data sharing across value chain. For example, you can do a campaign on collection of data about what happens on the roads of Innsbruck, and then you can learn something about the traffic, for example, and improve the situation. And then also, once you have these knowledge graphs, it's very nice to visualize them, that to show the user really what is being shared. For example, which data you share with which institution or with which campaign. And then also some of the things which can be really improved now, that, for example, consent revocation, that you can go as a user and revoke consent easily and at any time. It's not every application is doing this. And of course, when you introduce such features, it makes, and also in an easy and friendly way, it makes users feeling way better about data sharing, because they feel that they're in control, and also it's good for the company, yeah, because they don't get problems that they don't inform customers on how the data is shared, or they don't get potential problems with GDPR. So this kind of things also can be solved. And then we did test basically with users, some of papers already published, because these are still research prototypes, and then people are way more feeling better about sharing data when they interact with this kind of tools. Yeah, so basically, well, my research spans across data infrastructures and then services, so also toolkits to manage data and to applications. And the areas are also, well, quite diverse, ranging from marketing to smart cities sensors, and domain also covering research, smart cities, agriculture, and food. So some of the projects, so I'm also doing much of my research in EU and national funded projects, and so this is a normal way to fund my research. So some of them is this one, and some of them we even help companies also, like in the last one in Onto Commons, we help companies to use semantic technologies, and we derive best practices of adoption of these technologies for different companies. So, for example, company partners there are Bosch, Siemens, and many also smaller companies. So, okay, we of course also publish papers and as researchers, and data sharing, basically combining symbolic and sub-symbolic artificial intelligence and also responsible AI are my main research directions for the moment. So this has been for my part, and maybe for discussion, I would be happy to, well, find maybe additional use cases or developments or cooperation partners, because especially I'm new in the Netherlands, and see how we can enable more of data sharing with semantics.
Thank you, Anna. This is interesting. And I think I would also welcome to put you to include your email address in the chat, particularly around this topic of data sharing. We have we overrun a bit, but the content was rich, which should allow us to overrun. I think there are two themes, I would say, for the breakouts, and let's do a short one, about 10 minutes or so, Marita, Johan, Herman, is I think there are two topics. One is, and Geert-Jan is also pointing towards that, is one is about the data sharing versus open data initiatives. You see on one hand in the science world some good international big corporation examples, but that data sharing isn't that a kind of a potential risk as well for the privacy and other stuff we talked about earlier. So that's one topic that a group can work on or can discuss. And the other one, I think, Johan, you mentioned in a separate chat about transparency on the let me scroll back because Johan mentioned it somewhere up. Johan, can you, while I'm searching? Oh yeah, in spite of the vision for transparency when implementing AI machine learning, will bottom line performance / personal KPIs be more important than these desirable approaches at some point? So basically, Johan is questioning good topics for a small debate in splitted up groups. So we will overrun after 5:30, 5:30, so obviously you're free to drop off at 5:30, but I think we can extend a bit with about 10 more minutes. For now, we're going into breakouts, Marita, and see you back within max 9 minutes. We had an interesting one, but this was about data sharing, obviously, versus privacy. And I'm not sure, Herman or Johan, if you were going to go first, because I think from our group there's a more question on this challenge around data sharing, open data. Anna later. Johan.
Yeah, if I may, we were not finished discussing. It started to be more precise in terms of you need to understand your AI environment, and you need to have some mechanisms to stop or reduce the impact AI is going to do if you see that it is going wrong. And then the discussion was, but how do you see that? And we had a few examples from telco to, we have a Belastingdienst is an obvious one, but many more, and more we are feeling that we are not fully in control of that environment. I think that is bottom line what I sort of concluded.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
I didn't understand that. I mean, we finished the discussion. It was a very short one. Remember, like we needed a lot of time, of course.
Did you guys had time to solve?
Yeah, we have time to solve
well?
everything. Just make a data management plan and use the fucking template. Sorry, that was what Judy said in a way. So now we touched upon very short, like very short introduction and short view on how companies act, and if there was a sort of commonality in there, like are they all using on the provider side a code of conduct? And my question to Hans was, are you aware of these code of conducts and are you using them? And everybody mentioned more or less also the ethical part. And that you keep these things in mind. I think that was more or less what we touched upon in this very short time we had.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Herman. And was there another group as well, Marita? Were there 3 groups?
Yes, there were 3 groups, Jeroen.
So, okay, then again, in my group, we talked about more about data sharing for different purposes. We were also a bit intrigued, or I was, but Anna, I think it's also more a question to you on the example of Volkswagen. So we talked about, if you want to share your data, have also more and more around data sovereignty, where consumers want to own and control their own data. We talked about if a company like Volkswagen is doing open data initiatives and to ensure that self-driving vehicles will be safer, how does that fit together? Because they need a massive amount of training data, and on the other hand, if you are in a position as an individual to later on to pull out your driving behavior, then that algorithm will be flawed or become less effective. So it's about the question is, controlling the data, who controls the data, how to anonymize, but how do you see that? What is your kind of short take on idea on how those kind of initiatives can work in the future without things going crazy?
Yeah, this is also a kind of campaign, right? Well, maybe users would not agree to share maybe data with an insurance company, or but they maybe agree to share this data for research purposes to develop self-driving cars. Yes, it's another scenario, and but important is that, of course, the users and car drivers in this case know and understand what they share and with whom and for which purpose. And this is all set up in GDPR in a sense. Just the technical solutions are not, the good technical solutions are not in place yet.
Mm-hmm. So that's
Volkswagen would be happy to collect this data, I think, and use it for to also in such scenario when there are customers for this, right?
Yeah, and I'm happy to share that as a consumer with Volkswagen, but not as long as I am completely convinced that they're not sharing with my insurance Or with the Dutch police, to that matter?
With Dutch police, especially. No, with insurance, actually, there is already some scenarios are working in practice. For example, in Switzerland, I heard insurance companies have campaigns so that you can share your driving data with them, and then they give you discount on insurance for this, because because if you share data with them, probably you're very confident that you don't drive wrongly. So and this is good, so they give you a discount. So in a sense, there are already some business cases working, but not any kind of business cases broadly.
And also not to the larger use of
and
self-driving
everywhere
vehicles.
globally
No.
in the world.
No, exactly. Okay, thank you. I think we need to wrap it up. It was a bit of a wide conversation, I think, but it's touching upon topics close at many people's heart, I think. I mean, on one hand, the opportunity, understanding how businesses can leverage this, also kind of in a value chain. And second, also being a civilian and an individual, and being savvy and aware about protecting your data and ensuring your privacy. So a big one, a bigger theme perhaps for a separate full day event later on next year. And on that topic, I would like to wrap up. I think we have a final, having the drinks, we got a small interview that Herman recently did with Jackie Polak of Trend Micro, one of our partners. So I am gonna kickstart that video, and you can all have a drink and enjoy your package. My nuts are already gone almost, but starting on the absinthe soon. I would like to thank the audience for today, Rick of Orchest, Sophie and colleague of IBM, sorry, what's the first name? Peter, and then Anna of Wageningen University for adding your insights and information for today. And thanks for everyone joining. Let me kick off the presentation, and please stay on for another 5 to 10 minutes.
This is a day I've been looking forward to for a very long time.
We have a critical situation. Our edge computing capability is seriously degraded.
Come on, Dad, I thought we could all sit down and have dinner together.
We're now receiving a lot of calls from our medical partners describing what looks like a cascading failure of all our first-generation implants.
Dad? Hello? Dad, say something. Dad!
The truth always is subjective. Wouldn't you agree?
I was the first one there getting my hands dirty when no one gave a... Not you or not Corlo.
How a corporation of your stature is slower than a streaming journalist.
You need to know what did happen. So do you.
Sometimes there can be mistakes.
What I'm about to show you is shocking.
Goedemorgen, Herman.
Goedemorgen Jackie. Trend Micro, hè? Trend Micro, wat doet dat?
Trend Micro is een van de oudere bedrijven in de security wereld. Bijna 33 jaar.
Ja.
En dat is redelijk uniek. Dusdanig dat de ooit toenmalige oprichters van het bedrijf nog steeds de leiding vormen van dit bedrijf. Dus het is een heel stabiel bedrijf in de security wereld. En wat belangrijk is, is dat je ook ziet dat de oplossingen die je kan bieden aan de markt, door het geschiedenis dat we hebben, ook steeds ruimer en rijker worden. Je zou het bijna kunnen vergelijken met bijvoorbeeld de veiligheid van een auto. Ooit werd er een 3-puntsgordel uitgevonden en die heb je nu nog steeds nodig in een auto. Ook al zijn er steeds meer tools bijgekomen. En het feit dat we die ervaring hebben, nemen we dat tot op vandaag de dag mee in onze oplossingen.
Ja, en het leuke van wat ik dan van jullie weet, dat jullie eigenlijk gewoon een hele keten ook veilig maken, zeg maar. Van de cloud naar lokale netwerken en zelfs naar gebruikers toe, dat je gewoon eigenlijk de verantwoordelijkheid kan nemen voor een hele keten. En dat is in de enterprise wereld natuurlijk wel een... dus meestal hebben ze meer een focus op een bepaald gebied. Bijvoorbeeld alleen cloud security. Of alleen een ander. Jullie nemen een keten onder handen, of niet?
We nemen een keten onder handen. Eigenlijk heeft dat te maken met de visie die we hebben als het gaat over security. Dus waar we altijd naar kijken is, hoe ontwikkelt een infrastructuur zich? En dat moet je in de breedste zin van het woord nemen. Dus gebruikers die opeens mobiele telefoons meenemen in een netwerk. Steeds meer bedrijven die core processen in een cloud zetten. Steeds meer unmanaged devices, denk aan een ziekenhuis. Het tweede aspect waar we naar kijken is, wat gebeurt er bij de gebruiker? Heeft de gebruiker een andere verwachting? Ik noem het een laptop die je thuis meeneemt en daar ook op een wifi-netwerk zit en misschien werk voor school doet. Versus vroeger waarin alleen maar een computer in een netwerk stond. En als last but not least kijken we ook naar de verandering in het bedreigingslandschap. Wat is het verschil tussen misschien een virus van 10 jaar geleden versus de weloverwogen, lang uitgedachte, geduldige aanvallen die we op dit moment in de markt zien. Op het moment dat je daarover nadenkt en op het moment dat je daar een beeld van krijgt, dan zie je dat eigenlijk de enige manier om je nog volwaardig te beschermen is als je een keten beschermt. Niet meer kijkt naar één onderdeel, ik noem maar wat, naar een endpoint of naar een cloudomgeving, maar eigenlijk kijkt van hoe correleren alle dingen die we met elkaar beschermen, hoe correleren die met elkaar? De waarschuwingen die je op één punt krijgt, wat betekent dat voor het andere punt? En eigenlijk de enige manier waarop we onze klanten echt optimaal kunnen helpen, is door ook een duiding te geven aan al die waarschuwingen die je ziet. De waarschuwingen die je ziet in de markt. Trend Micro is koploper als het gaat over het vinden van kwetsbaarheden. In allerlei systemen en in allerlei applicaties en allerlei software. Maar we helpen onze klanten ook om te begrijpen van als je overal waarschuwingen hebt op verschillende punten, waar moet ik op acteren, waar moet ik bezorgd over zijn en wat is misschien een false positive en waar kan ik gewoon het laten gaan voor wat het is. En dat is de enige manier waarop je op dit moment je kan beschermen.
Ja, dit is een gezelschap van CIO's met CIONET. Wat is dan de insteek die jullie kiezen om met een CIO in gesprek te gaan? Want cybersecurity, jullie steken natuurlijk in op allerlei niveaus en allerlei onderdelen van organisaties. Wat is de reden om met de CIO in gesprek te gaan in deze?
Dat zijn meerdere redenen, maar ik denk als ik kijk naar de gesprekken die we het meeste hebben op dit moment, heeft dat twee hoofdgespreksonderwerpen. Het eerste is, steeds meer bedrijven zeggen van kijk, we moeten een business transformation doorgaan. We moeten bewegen, we moeten richting een cloudomgeving. We moeten onze dienst op een andere manier aanbieden. De tempo waarin dat gaat, maar ook soms wel bijna de ongecontroleerdheid waarin dat gaat. Want er zijn opeens DevOps afdelingen, opeens zijn er initiatieven. En het wordt steeds lastiger voor een CIO en of voor een CISO om een volledig beeld te krijgen. Dat is vaak het eerste gesprek waar we het hebben als het gaat over het beschermen van een cloudomgeving. En het andere, gesprek is waar ik het eigenlijk net over had, is hoe kun je een klant helpen om een volwaardig beeld te krijgen over wat gebeurt er nou in mijn bedrijf? Hoe weet ik nou zeker dat ik niet word aangevallen? Hoe kan ik mezelf beschermen ten opzichte van ransomware? En dan hebben we het heel vaak over die visie. Die visie van hoe weet je nou precies wat er gebeurt in je netwerk? Hoe kun je zien wat die kleine stapjes zijn die een potentiële hacker zet? En je daarover in bescherming te kunnen nemen. En dat zijn de gesprekken die we op dit moment met een CIO hebben.
Oké. En er zijn er bepaalde sectoren waar jullie op focussen? Of is het marktbreed?
Het is marktbreed. Maar de sectoren waar we de meeste focus op leggen is toch de enterprise. Maar denk dan ook gelijk aan bedrijven van een gelijke omvang als een enterprise. Dus dat kan ook heel goed een groot ziekenhuis zijn of een overheidsinstelling of een grote gemeente. Ook die rekenen wij tot onze klanten.
Oké. Ja, en dus wat ik begrijp, doordat je een van de oudste partijen op de markt bent, heb je natuurlijk ook heel veel gezien. Heel veel meegegroeid met de ellende die bedrijven kunnen overkomen.
Ja, helaas wel.
Ja, dat denk ik zeker. Maar blijven mensen, en zit er ook een soort historisch besef in jullie organisatie op dat vlak, dat die mensen lang blijven werken en dat inderdaad, zeggen we, jongens, dit hebben we 10 jaar geleden gezien en toen zijn we er zo mee omgegaan. Hebben jullie meer best practices dan andere partijen in de markt, denk je?
Nee, kijk,
en misschien worst practices?
Ja, kijk, sowieso als je langer meedraait, heb je gezien waar het vandaan komt. En je hebt misschien een wat beter begrip over de situatie die je aantreft bij een klant. Hoe is een bepaalde situatie gegroeid? En ja, ik denk dat we door onze ervaring veel best practices hebben. Precies ook wat je zegt, is ook worst practices. Want uiteindelijk, hoe raar het ook klinkt voor een commercieel bedrijf, maar onze concurrenten zijn niet bedrijven die soortgelijke security oplossingen aanbieden. Maar onze concurrenten zijn uiteindelijk de slechterikken die proberen om ransomware te deployen bij een bedrijf. Die proberen om een bedrijf te hacken. Die proberen om een bedrijf plat te leggen. Dat zijn de concurrenten waar we echt tegen strijden.
Ja. Nou, ja, het is mij duidelijk. Wat dat betreft zijn jullie echt, denk ik, voor een heleboel leden bij ons in de CIONET. En niet alleen in Nederland, maar gewoon door heel Europa heen, denk ik, een hele interessante partij in deze tijd. Het wordt steeds actueler. Hè. In Nederland zien we heel veel partijen. Nou ja, vorige week nog VDL natuurlijk met een heel verhaal. Ik weet niet hoe jullie daarmee te maken hadden, maar of je daar een deel van de oplossing mocht zijn of niet. Dat soort dingen zie je nu veel verschijnen en het komt ook steeds meer in het nieuws natuurlijk.
Dat brengt ons, Marita, ben ik duidelijk te verstaan? Of ja, hè?
Ja, ben je.
Of niet? Dat is op zich niet erg. Ja. En dat brengt ons tot het einde van de sessie. Leuk, Herman en Jackie, altijd leuk om het verhaal achter de logo's op de slides te horen. We gaan het regelmatig doen. En het leukste is om dat natuurlijk in één ruimte te doen als het weer mag. We gaan zien wanneer dat zal zijn. Het zal wel,
ik kan iedereen aanraden om het clipje waar we mee begonnen zijn. Het heet Trend 2030. Het is iets wat we iedere 10 jaar doen. En dan doen we een soort van vooruitblik van hoe ziet de wereld er over 10 jaar uit. Dat linkje is ook op YouTube te vinden. Je hebt net
Marita gooit het net in de chat. Ja,
we hebben dat ook voor 2020 gedaan. Ook als je in de bio van die YouTube kijkt, dan kan je ook zien van hoeveel is er uitgekomen van wat we in 2010 over 2020 hebben voorspeld. En helaas is er best een heel hoop uitgekomen. Helaas, want dat betekent dat een hoop onheil die we voorzagen is gebeurd. Het Trend 2020 was een document en het Trend 2030 is een 6-delige Netflix-achtige serie van 10 minuten per aflevering die het kijken meer dan waard is en voor ieder die in een IT-omgeving werkt inspirerend en interessant en het geeft in ieder geval een heel hoop food for thought. Dus die wilde ik nog even meegeven.
Dankjewel, Jackie. En we zagen daar zeg maar zo'n preview van aan het begin, veronderstel ik. Want
dat is de trailer.
Ja, top. Dankjewel, Jackie. En dankjewel, Herman, ook voor het gesprek. En ik sluit hierbij af voor vandaag. Bedankt allemaal voor deelname en interesse. En laat ons weten hoe het gewaardeerd is. En we zien elkaar ongetwijfeld op een volgende gelegenheid weer. Fijne avond. Tot ziens.
Allemaal.
Dag.